have always been fascinated by the character of Sri Krishna of the Gita. Because when I think of Krishna, there are two facets of divinity that appear before me. One is the Krishna as a major deity in Hinduism, revered as the eighth avatar and a supreme god in his own right. He is known for his roles as a protector, a compassionate being, and a divine hero. Krishna's stories portray him in various roles. As a mischievous child, a divine lover to his devotees, and the knower of all. Krishna is often depicted playing the flute, surrounded by adoring devotees, symbolizing his role as the divine lover and as a source of joy and spiritual wisdom. Krishna as the Supreme is held in that high esteem as the one who fulfills all desires and giver of everything. That is the Krishna that is revered with prayers and devotion. The Krishna takes on multiple forms. This Krishna that is revered as the Supreme takes on multiple forms, and it depends on your own imagination. For some, this Krishna is a child. For someone else, this Krishna is a wish-fulfilling parent. And for some others, the Krishna can be an approachable friend. You can imagine Krishna in whatever way you want, and he'll be there for you. This Krishna is the anchor for prayer, bhakti, or devotion. But you see, then I have this other view of Krishna. The individual on the battlefield standing right in the middle of a war happening between two cousins and their armies. A war that is based on ethical and righteous considerations, with one side being unfair, unethical, unrighteous, and the other side becoming a victim, even though they were righteous, ethical, and fair. This second Krishna standing on the battlefield rendered the Gita to Arjuna, one of the main warriors of the war and a favorite disciple of Krishna. This Krishna is much, much different than the mischievous child, the divine lover, or even the giver of everything and the one that we keep in our prayers. Or the Supreme Krishna as I described earlier. To defeat unrighteousness, this Krishna is a maverick, a master of governance, a master at deal making. He is a master at negotiations. He really seems to have the ultimate, utmost wisdom. Think of him like a human, but one with ultimate, utmost wisdom. He seems to be the role model of perfect human intelligence and the one having intelligent knowledge. He is ever practical and cautious. Before he makes any decisions, he looks at what is the decision being made, what is the impact of that decision, what is right versus what is wrong, who is impacted by the decision, what are the implications, both short-term and long-term, by those decisions, what are the risks of not making that decision. In other words, this Krishna of the Gita goes through everything that you and I go through on a daily basis, but does it with this ultimate wisdom, with this intelligent knowledge that he leverages. So in this context, I no longer see Krishna as a mischievous child, a divine lover, but I see Krishna as a sage and philosopher. He seems to have access and a window to everything and anything in this universe. This sage Krishna gives out answers to life's questions that range from the bigger cosmic questions to the usual questions that trouble us daily. Just think about the questions this Krishna of the Gita answers. He defines how the universe operates almost like a scientist. He talks about what are your duties, why is there duality in your daily life, what does morality mean in this universe, what does charity mean, why should you give charity, what should you eat, how should you have a life of discipline and why is that needed? What helps you go beyond than what you see in front of you? What are those ideals that should become your objectives and goals? So this Krishna is like a coach, a teacher, everything, right? Together. Much different than the supreme, divine, mystical. But interestingly, this Krishna is no different than the sages of the Upanishads. The Upanishads were written by sages who transmitted them, conveying words of wisdom. They imparted teachings to the students sitting next to them. They had a far-fetched vision. They could see through the universe. They could define what divinity means, what God means, and give out specifics on what does godliness mean, including defining each aspect of God. Then they detail the core of what it means to be a human. They define the nature around us and so on. So the Krishna, the sage, is no different than the sages of the Upanishad. I have realized that I need the first Krishna, the Supreme, as an anchor of devotion, as an anchor, as a parent, as a child, and as a friend that I always have by my side. This Krishna, the Supreme, is a projection of divinity in my personal form. But then I need a teacher, a coach, a master who can guide me through living life the right way, seeking and inquiring the truth. And that, my friends, is Krishna the sage, the philosopher. I get my guidance through the guide given by this sage, the philosopher, which is the Gita. When I look at it this way, I struggle to take the Gita's messages of God and Supreme and attribute that to a person or sage Krishna. I think it's much beyond that. I think when Krishna makes such references, he is referring to something that is beyond a human, beyond a person. History shows that Krishna was on this earth 5,000 years ago. And he makes a claim in the Gita that whenever there are problems and unrighteousness on the rise, he will show up. Now a rational mind will say, come on Krishna, when will you show up again? There is so much unrighteousness around us. Children being killed, whenever you see a tsunami hitting a war, whenever you see bad things happening in this world, when innocents die, why is that Krishna as an avatar or incarnation is not showing up? What is that Supreme Krishna waiting for? How much more? Many believe Krishna will come back again in the future in a different incarnation. And to me, that's not what sage Krishna really means in the Gita. And that's not what Gita's Krishna is about. When you envision Gita's Krishna as a sage, then you have a better view and understanding of his teachings. Gita's verses are not meant to be focusing on the individual or the person Krishna, but rather on the message being imparted by that philosopher, by that individual. Gita's Krishna is calling out loudly that whenever there is unrighteousness, wherever there is unrighteousness, righteousness has to show up. And that is not some external individual or entity coming at some point, but it is you and I and our behaviors and actions, and we need to show up differently following the guidelines of the Gita. Using the Gita, Krishna is asking us to make choices, exercise our choices, be thoughtful, make decisions. In other words, Krishna is actually asking us to emulate him, the sage, the role model of intelligent knowledge and wisdom. He is asking us to do it within our family, within our society, within our friends, within our extended community, and within this entire nation. Having this understanding becomes paramount because that then drives our behavior. I will close this video with 3 specific examples from Gita that hopefully will further elaborate what I explained and why you need to look at Krishna the Supreme separate from Krishna the Sage. For example, in one of the verses, Krishna says that very few understand him. Vasudevam sarvamiti sa mahatma sudurlabhaha, he says. Very few understand Vasudeva. Now you can look at this in 2 ways. One of them being Krishna, the son of Vasudeva, standing there in the battlefield, is actually the supreme, all-encompassing, all-ultimate, and very few understand that individual standing there as the supreme. Very easy, isn't it, to say it that way? It almost like just blind belief. And that's how many of us do it. But actually the other way to look at it, and in my view the correct way, from a Gita perspective, again I'm being very clear, from a Gita and Upanishadic perspective, is to think of sage Krishna preaching to us that divinity is in the form of Vasudeva, the Lord of all Vasus, or all the energies, all the senses. And the sage here is reminding us that don't let your ego come in the way to think that you are in control and things happen just because of you. In fact, he is reminding us to say very few appreciate the fact that there's a larger energy manifesting and sustaining this universe, and we are all connected. It's not about one person. It's not about Krishna, the personified individual. Now, which one makes sense? The first one of thinking Krishna as an individual, as the ultimate and the all-encompassing, or the second one that looks at it from the aspect of divinity. Take a second example. In many places of the Gita, Krishna says, everything belongs to me and everything is in me, and whenever you perform an action, think of me. Now, what does me here represent? What does me represent here? Is it just that person, the individual standing again in the battlefield, preaching Arjuna? Or is it sage Krishna, the role of ultimate wisdom, or the role model rather, of utmost wisdom, asking us to factor every choice thoroughly and be deliberate about it, and take an objective view in performing the action or the choice and not get swayed by emotions. In performing these actions and by saying think of me, sage Krishna basically is asking us to emulate him. Now look at the third and the last example. There's many, but I'm just giving you 3 here. When Krishna says surrender everything to me, is this the sage asking us to surrender based on the teaching he's sharing? Precisely. It's not about surrendering to an individual, to an entity, but it's actually the sage saying, hey, surrender based on the teaching he's sharing, following the guidelines. Basically saying, performing the action, surrender it to the larger universe, and the universe comes back to you with an outcome. The outcome at the end may be in your favor or not in your favor, but that's not in your hands. That's what Krishna is saying. So to bring it full circle, I think the 2 facets of Krishna are very much needed. The first one is what we are all very familiar with and accustomed to. The Krishna in the temple, the Krishna the God, the Krishna the Supreme, the powerful, the giver of grace. the Krishna of which is the anchor of any type of bhakti or devotion. We all know that Krishna, and that is what we all think when we think of Krishna. But I believe the sage Krishna, the philosopher, the coach, the teacher, is who we actually need in our daily life. When we follow the teachings and live our life following the sage Krishna, then we become eligible to receive the grace of that supreme Krishna. Very, very, very few look at Krishna in this way. I hope on this channel we look at Krishna from both of those aspects and both of those facets. The Supreme, the God, but also more importantly, look at what Sage Krishna and the philosopher Krishna has to say and follow his guidelines. Then you can use the term him or his. Otherwise, you cannot attribute him or his to a supreme entity, because the supreme entity is beyond just this material manifestation. I will talk to you very soon. Till then, stay blessed, stay healthy.